Good evening, you're very welcome to the final edition of Ireland's Generation X, a series of conversations about Ireland's in-between generation. We're delighted to present Ireland's Generation X in partnership with the Keough Institute for Irish Studies at the University of Notre Dame. My name is Benedict Schlepper-Connolly, I'm the digital curator here at Molly, and we're on Dublin St Stephen's Green and open 6 days a week from Tuesday to Sunday, 10:30am to 6pm, with late opening on Thursdays until 7:30pm, so do drop by and visit us soon. This evening we're once again joined by Professor Barry McCrea, a novelist and scholar of comparative literature, and he'll be in conversation with the writer Claire Kilroy. Kilroy, whose work has been described as savagely comic and great fun by the New York Times, is the author of 4 novels. That's All Summer, Tenderwire, All Names Have Been Changed, and The Devil I Know. Claire is currently working on Darling, a novel about motherhood. If you enjoyed tonight's programme, I'd encourage you to buy Molly membership for yourself or for a friend. It's really the best way to support the museum and our programming. Just visit molly.ie/membership to find out more. Before we begin, I'd like to extend our special thanks to Professor Barry McCrea for leading us through this really illuminating series of conversations with Ireland's Generation X, and to all at the Keough Institute for Irish Studies at the University of Notre Dame, in particular Catherine Wilston and Mary Hendrickson, for such a rich collaboration. And with that, I'll hand you over to Professor Barry McCrea and to Claire Kilroy. Enjoy the evening.
Hi Claire.
Hi Barry.
So you're the last in our series, and that's because we held out to do it in person. I'm very glad we did. So this series has been about writers born in what we're calling the long 1970s, but who have shared that kind of cultural soup. We're all cooked in that cultural soup. So maybe just tell us about the world you grew up in, your childhood, 1980s Howth, I suppose we're talking about.
80s or 70s? Because they were so different.
Well, start with the 70s.
Well, the 70s was sunny and happy. Like, I remember it was a very different economic environment and a very free. We were free-range children, we were just out. And then the 80s came and it was miserable because of the economic depression. And I remember that not quite being the end of childhood, but a bleakness setting in quite early on in our lives that I know it defined me. I'm an architect's daughter, and from whenever the recession got really bad, we lived with this fear that he's going to lose his job, we're all going to have to emigrate. We were about to emigrate to Australia, and my dad broke his leg, and that didn't happen. But the 70s was great, the 80s was horrible.
So you're about to emigrate to Australia and your father broke his leg, and that's why he didn't go?
That's why I speak with this accent, Dublin. Yeah, it was that harsh. Like my uncle, my mother's brother, was also an architect, and he had to go to London every week and come home, and his baby making strange with him, that kind of thing. The 80s was a tough old time, and I would say, as much as I'm defined by the 70s seems, and actually this is only dropping now, I love the 70s. I love 70s clothes, I love 70s music. I hate the 80s because it was just hard. It was a bleak, hard decade of fear and panic. Do you remember the news every night was this factory closed in that place with the loss of this amount of jobs, and there was no good news, not here anyway. So that's,
Well, I remember it's lots and lots of children and very little money or jobs.
Lots of children, lots of dogs.
Lots of dogs.
Lots of dogs,
yeah.
None of them had collars, lots of dog poo. And as I say, we did go out and play. We just ran around all the time, and that was great, that aspect of it. And now I'm a mother, and I cannot tally my childhood with his, or my experience of school with his. And I don't know how it'll play out for him, because it's so different. Because first of all, there were loads of us in the class. Second of all, there was corporal punishment, Catholicism. Mind you, he has Catholicism, but probably not as old school as we had. So all that stuff defines you in ways that you don't get possibly ever. But I find the Catholicism, though I don't regard myself as a Catholic or believe in God, it's all over my work.
It is,
Whether I like it or not, it's there.
So maybe say a bit more about what bits of the primary school world that we had, that I mean you had in Howth, that stuck with you through the rest of your life? So, like say Catholicism specifically, what kind of bits of it would you say?
Confession. Do you remember confession? The box. Did you have to get into the box?
Oh yeah, I had to get into the box.
The box is gone for the kids. You know, it's and it's called reconciliation now. So just that idea of someone else watching you, that was so horrible. Like someone always watching you, and even as a child, you'd sit on the toilet and go, God's watching me. To internalise that, you know, they go on and on and on about Irish guilt, and there's a reason for that, because it is the watching person is inside you. It's instilled in you from, well, say I was the communion year, I was 6, so 5 going in, 6 finishing it. So you had that. God is watching you.
Yeah.
You know.
Do you feel there's a positive side to that too? That like at least somebody cares. Like they might be a very judgmental somebody, but it's important what you do. Do you think that's helpful for a writer because it's such a self-starting, lonely profession? The idea, this kind of internalized idea that someone is watching.
You know, just as you asked that, I don't think I ever felt God loves you, even though we were told all the time God loves you, and that you're special because God gave you a soul. So no. In fact, the writing came as part of rebellion against all of that. Just I don't want to be part of this anymore. And indeed, I've wondered if I wasn't so kind of cauterized against it by, you hit 14 and everything sort of explodes. And if I wasn't so angry, would I have had the drive to keep going against, there are a lot of reasons why you should not become a writer or go into the arts. There are far more reasons than not. But
we don't have time today to go into all of those reasons.
I have to pay someone to listen to that. But if it had been easier, maybe I wouldn't have felt so angry. And I think anger is actually a really good thing when you're that age, it clarifies what you want and what you're part of and what you're not part of, and you find a different tribe. Like I remember getting really into Joyce at that age, and he was very down on the church. His work was a rebellion from it and the paralysis, and and I found that exciting, and I was like, yeah, what he says, and I'm on this bus, not your bus, and that was. So no, it wasn't that I felt welcomed into God's love. It was like, I don't believe any of this, and I don't believe that someone can see me all the time, and I am going a different route here.
So just listening to these things you're saying now about your early childhood. So your father's an architect. There was unemployment and economic poverty around, and Catholicism. So I suddenly, as you're talking, I can just see that running through all of your work. Money, and especially debt, is a theme. It's there in Tenderwire. It's there all the way through to the end. Buildings are very important. Obviously in the Dublin, but actually just generally buildings, I'm just thinking they seem to be very present. And then these kind of this, not quite satanic figures, well, in the last novel, satanic, but a sense of a fear of punishment and that they all seem to be running through.
Yeah, and a lot of that actually, that I have an idea of the abyss, that people have an abyss. And I speak as someone who doesn't have a particular abyss, but I got glimpses of the abyss, and actually not so much from Irish Catholicism, but from going to New York when I was 20, and ended up hanging out with all these recovering alcoholics who lived on the edge of that abyss. And if they took a drink, they were down in the abyss, and it was hell. And I spent that whole summer going to AA meetings in New York and listening to these stories. And coming from my background, which was safe, middle class, my dad didn't lose his job, so it worked out okay. Coming from that to people who were completely without anchors and partially in terror, that actually is where I got the whole demons, devil, this blackness that isn't that far away for some people. And I tend to write about those people, or did in my younger years. You know, I'm at a different era now in my writing life, and the abyss isn't. It's not. There's bits of the abyss, but it's different now. You know, I think when you're young, you're very volatile, and it's also very interesting. You know, it's you know, when you're on a train platform and a train comes. This doesn't happen to me anymore, but it would happen a lot when I was in my 20s, and you just think, what if I jump? You know that? And it's not I didn't want to kill myself, but it was just like, what if? That would be a radical new way of, and short way of looking at the world. You know, it's just that interest in looking at the chaos.
But you haven't throughout your work, it seems to me, just listening to you again there, is people who kind of go into an abyss and then come out or seem to come out. It's not always clear to what extent the kind of exit from the abyss is real or an illusion. Is that right, would you say?
Well, certainly the last guy didn't get out of the abyss. So
no, he didn't.
I
just mean like there are these objects like the painting in All Summer, the violin in Tenderwire, and then in a way the kind of salvation figure of the famous writer in All Names Have Been Changed. That
is more about art. Art is the salvation, because that was my salvation. On a very literal level, that was my salvation. So certainly those three, my first three novels are the arts. As you said, one was a painting, the second one was music, and the third one was writing. And that's because it was my redemption. You know, I used to have the leaving cert dream. That's probably defines us. And older generations, I don't know if the younger kids have it as much, but the fear of do you remember the leaving cert and the...
I do, yeah,
sorry,
God, how'd I ever forget. Yeah.
You know, the leaving cert was horrible, but I used to have that dream, oh Christ, it's the leaving cert. And then one day I had to do the leaving cert and I didn't know anything because it was so long ago. And then I went, I wrote a novel. And they went, okay, you can go. And it was just this joy that I've gotten out of that system that I hated so much. So, yeah, it's that
about growing up, yeah.
It is. Art was salvation for me. It was my get out of jail card.
So let's go back just then to Hoth specifically, because
sure.
So it's always there.
Yes.
But in The Devil You Know, it really becomes central, and you quote the opening of Finnegan's Wake, Hoth Castle and environs, and the main character is this old noble family from Hoth Castle, and so it's a big part of. Well, you're a very international writer, and your influences and what you read and draw on, but Hoth specifically is very. So maybe just tell me about the Hoth you grew up in and where that is in your imagination.
It's so strange because the older I get, it's becoming bigger. The Hoth I grew up in was idyllic. Hoth is beautiful. I mean, Hoth is this beautiful peninsula. I now live in Hoth. I moved out, I moved around, we got ourselves back to Hoth. And I just found out that the Irish for the area that I live in, Deer Park, is Park na Fianna. Because the Fianna used to train in, I'd heard that before, and remember I mentioned to you, you came out to Hoth and I said, somewhere there's ancient oaks here. Still can't find them, but the Fianna used to, and I just feel this history there. You know, I do genuinely feel this history there. So the house I grew up in, as I mentioned, was always sunny in my head. It was always sunny.
I like our climate.
Yeah. The gorse was always in blossom. Gorse will always be in blossom in Hoth summer, but in April, May, it's like boing, you know, green, or sorry, yellow everywhere, and the smell, that coconutty smell, and the cracking then later in the year when the seed pods burst. There were a lot of ponies. Cherry O'Brien had his pony club going, and as a kid I discovered the ponies. Kids used to just hang out with ponies, little girls, sorry, very much was a gender thing, and we'd go up and groom these ponies. And then when we were old enough, we got to gallop around on the ponies, and we had this freedom of this magnificent peninsula. And I feel very protective of it. And at the moment it's under siege again because they're back to developers, but they bought Hoth Castle after 900 years. They sold it to a capital company the family who had it since 1100 or whatever.
This is basically predicted in your novel. I mean, that's more, I mean, there's a...
Yeah, the worst happened in the novel, and I didn't think it would happen because it never occurred to me that the family would sell, and they've sold it to a capital company, and it's being carved up, and and I feel this anxiety that they want to build on it. Obviously, it's an old castle domain with walls, and so now I fear for this place I love for the future, because say if I even look at it from a literary history, Yeats lived in Howth and wrote about the ghosts of Howth, and then Joyce, where I met you last year, the Rhododendron Gardens, Howth Castle and Varns. It's this history that is, as I say, literature has been my salvation, so Howth is tied in with that those people that I felt fueled by walked these lands that we must protect. And we, the punters, are far less powerful than developers and investment.
And do you think as a writer that it's been, to have a very strong sense of being from a very particular place has given you, I suppose, imaginative strength to speak? Yes.
I remember once thinking I was going to emigrate and I didn't want to. And realising I'm walking around the hills, the West Mountain, going, this is who I am, this is who I am. And you're chanting something before you tune into what you're saying, and this is who I am, I'm this, and I love it,
Yeah.
And it's partly the beauty, partly the historicity, is that the right word? The sense of time, both past, future, that this thing has endured. And it's quite hard to describe this feeling I get, but it's also an anxiety because I'm fear for it. And I realise I'm going around scared for Howth. It's a very odd thing to be scared for.
I suppose if you feel you're part of the landscape yourself, then it is.
Then it's an encroachment on on me.
So then you went to Trinity. So what about that? Tell me a bit about your literary education and how, because you were inclined towards writing and reading from a very early age.
Yes.
And then I suppose the moment it became a professional was when you became a student of English in Trinity, is that right?
Yeah, well, no, I would have left Trinity by then, but Trinity was the kind of opposite to the rest of my education. Trinity was the place to get to. As I said, I got very alienated as a teenager by pretty much everything. And I knew if I can get myself to do English in Trinity, I'll be on the right path. I'm feeling good. So it became a place for me to get to quite early on. And say Joyce was all UCD. It was UCD, UCD, but...
Yeah, he was under the tree just there. Yeah. There's a photograph of him under that tree. Yeah.
Yes, but Trinity was where I wanted. I suppose they didn't let Catholics in, but they did. In my day, it was also to do with Dublin, being in your city centre, but it was the opposite. And also I wanted to do English, and I'd been reared with all these dole cues, and studying English was going to be just an extension of a dole cue. I knew that. The Celtic Tiger was another decade off. So it was freedom, to get in there. And everything became about getting... I sound like I'm overstating it, and I'm not. I hated secondary school with a passion. I went to school in Clontarf. I hated it. It was a convent, all-girl, bitchy, And maybe there is no secondary school in Howth, but Howth is a very mixed society. Everybody is there. There's fishermen, there's wealthy people, there's a middle class, there's this old Protestant crowd. There was poverty because of there's a lot of social housing, still is. So it was a very mixed society, and then when I went to Clontarf, it was blanket middle class and just stifling, because everyone's the same. So I couldn't hack that at all, leaving the kind of mix to go to this especially girls put a lot of any gender together is not great, you know.
No.
Genders are better just mixed.
Mix them and match them is usually better. And so then Trinity was this liberation, and quite a few of the writers that I talked to in this series have mentioned, well, those who went to Trinity, that it was a key pivotal, not just being students, but there's something about Trinity in that time that was very important in their formation as writers. Is that the case for you too?
Yeah. And it's hard to say, it was just the people were interesting. There's something cool about it, exciting, you know. I still always walk past Trinity when I come into town. I haven't seen Trinity, I hadn't seen it until today. And now they have wildflowers in the in front of front arch, you know, and it's great. It's there, you know. When everything else changes, that facade is still there. And it's a touchstone. It's security. Like, imagine if you went to town and it was gone. Like, imagine how shocking that would be. So yeah, it is I suppose when you have no path, and writers don't have a path, they have to invent the path as they go. If you can find foundations like Trinity, you put it there, you put your Joyce there, you put your poets in, you put all the stuff that makes sense. You have to kind of hoard it together, and now you've got that much path, and you go there and you find some more, and you keep, you know, try to construct a route for yourself. So
it is interesting to me that the way you just talked about Trinity there is quite similar to the way you were talking about Howth earlier.
Yeah.
You know, something that should always be there.
yes,
And I wonder if this question of change and anxiety about change or things going is that also, along with the question of economic anxiety, is that a shadow not cast over your work, but that is present in your work, do you think?
certainly what I'm writing now, no. It's present in my life as a person. No. I think we go through loss of self as we get older, and that person I'm talking about with great excitement is gone, and I know that, and I'm writing about that. And it's particularly stark if you become a mother. Your guillotine comes down on your whole life, because now you're just this person minding your baby.
Yeah.
So now what I'm working on now is about specifically the self, you know, and I can look at it from that perspective. That's the past. Trinity, well, Howth is my present as well. But yeah, I am anxious about all the change. And it's funny, like on the bus coming in, I recently reread Ulysses and love that sense of Dublin, you know. And just coming in on the bus, I hadn't been on the bus in ages because it's the whole pandemic, but you know, just an old man was walking by and he saw the bus and he just went, and then I'm gone. And it's just like, that's
Yeah.
what this city is. I'd hate that to go. That specific Irish thing of...
Did you remember we all thought during the Celtic Tiger that it was gone forever, and then
No.
it has proved very
Yeah.
resilient.
Yes, we communicate through gags,
Yeah.
through, it's, you know, it's just, it is actually enduring. So when I see little flashes of, you know, I'm going, it's all right, it's going to be... Mind you, he was older. If I saw somebody 20 waving at him,
Yeah, you might be
man
worried.
driving a bus.
So then after Trinity, you went into television.
Yes, I did.
Yeah. So just tell us the story of your career then until you became a published novelist.
This was trying to invent the path, and that's when I got out of college, it was 95, and the Celtic Tiger was beginning. Like we were reared to emigrate, you know, and I had a green card to the States. I'd been to the States the year before. I'd worked in Germany for a while, then I got a green card to the States, and I was going to emigrate. Again, not really wanting to, but it's what I'd been reared to do and what I expected to do and what I was prepared to do. And then film industry started taking off here. It wasn't that I just wanted to work in film, it's just it started taking off, and I got onto a FOSS course and did a FOSS course in film and television skills or something. And after being a runner all over in editing places, I got a job on Ballycasangel, which was a BBC TV drama about a priest, a nice priest. and worked in that for 3.5 years while starting my novel, starting all summer, because TV is freelance. You work really, really, really hard for 22 weeks, and then you're unemployed and you don't know when your next job is. So in the unemployed, don't know when my next job is, that's when I started putting together the novel. And I wrote a first draft in 10 weeks, which just, it took me, the last novel I've written, it's not the one that will come out, I think it took 6 years to get a first draft. So somehow, I think out of panic, I managed to block out a novel. And it was the first draft, like it largely remained similar enough. And once I had that, then it was back to Trinity. I've made it sound smoother than it was. It started going wrong for me in there, but my heart was not in it anyway. I liked editing. I actually learned an awful lot from editing.
Yeah.
Specifically you move stuff around. You get your shooting script and you shoot it and you stick it together, scene 1 to scene 60.
Sometimes I can see it in your writing because you're very good at transitions among the things you're good at. And I wondered, did you hone that skill in Ballykissangel?
Oh, yeah. Everything got moved around. That's the wrong opening. Open, try that. No, try that. Okay, move that. And it was that. Like there was a picture of each scene, and you'd have 60. And I loved that. I thought that was really interesting. And the plasticity of narrative was exciting to me. And of course we had laptops, so we could do that or typing. That would have been, actually things would have been different, but if we hadn't computers when we worked. But you can just cut, paste, move around, and that was exhilarating. I used to love watching it come together, and how things change if you put them in different places, even though they haven't changed. They just seem changed.
So you brought those skills then to creative writing in Trinity, and then you published 4 novels in relatively quick succession. And that's one arc of your...
Yes.
So we just talk about that before we move on to the later stuff, because one of the things that's come up again, talking to the other writers the last while, is that the idea that writers born in and around the 1970s in Ireland, that their work makes more use of humour than, say, writers a generation older or a generation younger. And I was rereading your work the last few days, and it's definitely true in yours. There's a kind of an ironic edge to it, where you never fully know what is serious and sincere and what is kind of a gag. That I think might be characteristic of that generation. Do you think that's true?
I think that goes back to the bus thing. I think it's an Irishism. That's the thing I'm scared of losing. As I mentioned, a while ago, finished rereading Joyce, and that humour, that Irish, Joyce, it's Dublin humour, but it's there. Like after the funeral, Paddy Dignam, his funeral, and Corny Kelleher, who's the funeral director, comes up and goes to the funeral attendees, that went off A1, what? And you're the funeral director. Yeah. I think, oh, please say that won't ever be lost.
Yeah, I live opposite a primary school, and the other day I walked out of the house and the children were all screaming at me from behind the railings.
At you?
Yeah, and I realised their ball had gone over the railings and they wanted me to go. So I ran over and retrieved it and threw it over. And there was like great shouts of adulation. It was a wonderful, wonderful way to start my day, like 40 screams. Then I turned around the corner and this man, a bit like your man in the bus, looking at the bus, he just walked with the cap and everything. He just looked at me without smiling or anything. He just said, "Here he comes, hero of the hour." And I was like, and off he went. I'm not sure, was he making fun of me? Was he like, did he see how proud I was? Or was he, anyway, it was, so it's alive and well in Dublin 8. Anyway.
Yeah, well, I hope it's, like, how can that be lost?
I think that stuff has strong antibodies, you know.
Yeah,
I
I
think,
do.
I think it'd be hard to get rid of it.
I think it's in the bloodline.
But I wonder, is there also a particular kind of growing up in the 1970s and 80s brand of humour that is there?
I tell you one thing that is different from us and older is we didn't have the internet. We just had mono channels. Now my kid begs to be let watch YouTube and watch gamers on YouTube, and I've noticed his sense of humour is lifted from their gags, and you see that's his pool, whereas we just had it was about that size, the pool of humour.
Yeah.
But we were all in the same pool.
A lot of hooks. Yeah.
Yeah, and we were all working from the same jokes and the same cultural references and the same way of being. So
that's true.
You know, that will change it.
That this kind of sense that there is some sort of common culture that you can refer to, and it'll be funny because everybody will know what you're referring to is. You know what I mean?
Yes. Plus, my kids' scope of reference is going to be completely different to mine. You know, we had Wanderly Wagon. What else?
What more do you need?
It was really.
I got satisfied all my desires.
It was a really weird show. Like, I used to scream when the crow came on. But he has, and it's not Irish. Is the other thing about his frame of reference. They seem to be mainly American. So I do remember when Friends came on. Do you remember when Friends started? People started speaking with that accent, like us.
Yeah.
By people, I mean we. A lot of people my age started, you know, going like that. It's so funny. You know, so, will my kid ever have that uniformity? No. So does that mean we will lose the, you know, hero of the hour gag? You know, I don't know. They'll have different gags.
I suppose, everybody has given a toolbox, and then you see what to do with it. But just because you mentioned America there, like it is, so you asked us to read this essay you wrote about motherhood for today. And I was actually, I was told, well, I did the homework. Okay. And I'd read it before, so I read it again this morning actually. And I was thinking of asking about some of the bits that are at the edges of it rather than what's at the center of it. And it opens with this sentence about America.
Yes.
And I was wondering what America, both as a place and as an idea, and even as a literary tradition, has meant to you. Because it comes up here and there in your work, and also in conversation with you.
Yeah.
I didn't know you'd done this thing in New York. But Nabokov is a writer that you're often associated with, and I see the real similarities, especially
again a
in
funny
later,
writer, you know.
Yeah, and who was really from somewhere that really was gone.
Yeah.
I mean, there was no way. I mean, there was no House Castle left. It was all of us.
Yeah.
Every trace of it. He's from a place that didn't exist anymore.
Wow.
But I think of him also as an American writer, obviously.
Yes.
But so, what about America for you in American fiction? And I was just very struck by the fact that you opened this very personal, very intimate essay that's set in the Coombe and places like very Dublin. You opened it with, it was written in Villanova, but there was something about America and the imagination that seemed important.
Well, actually, it was that America had pulled me out of motherhood, because Ireland doesn't support motherhood. Therefore, Ireland is a maternal society, meaning that the mother does everything, and there isn't supported childcare or any of that. You have to. It's very, very expensive. It's more expensive in Ireland than the States. And then I got offered work in Villanova University, and I took it, and it was great, and it liberated me from my child. It sounds terrible. He's a lovely kid, but I found it extremely hard to be a full-time mother. And with a writer's income, you are a full-time mother. You know, unless you've had some sort of commercial success, you're not going to be able to afford those fees. But then this job came, and now I had an income, I had a job, and now I can pay for childcare. So that was the first time I was able to put sentences together, and they're all very short sentences because it was written in between his naps. It's the quickest thing I've ever written. It's the least edited thing I've ever written, but it was the first glimpse of I'm going to get out of this hole. You know, I felt very, as I mentioned, that guillotine, that hurt. You know, it actually physically hurts when you're cut off from your writing life, from your thinking life, from your being. You know, it was very harsh. So I was rescued by Villanova University, who offered me this. Now I'm an income generating unit, which is really important. You know, because once there's a baby, we're into unpaid labour and who does it. And I've become very aware of who's doing the unpaid labour, and it is a female endeavour. And we saw it again at COVID when, you know, the childcares and the schools, they all closed. So who was doing it again? It's women. So it was set in Villanova because, thank you, Villanova. You know, thank you for giving a new mother. He was 2. I was 2 years into motherhood, but this was the first escape from it. And therefore the first time I could write, because I hadn't written anything for so long. Because if you have this going on, you cannot think. You know, it was absolutely remarkable what motherhood did to my brain, and I tried to write it down there.
Yeah, I was going to say, maybe if any of the bold listeners haven't done the homework, you might just summarise that essay, because it was an unusual foray into non-fiction for you as well.
Yeah,
and so maybe just run us through what the essay.
Well, the main thing about motherhood was how unprepared I was for how you can no longer think. If you have, I feel like you're kind of sold a pup. You're sold this image of, and it is that too, you know, but it's a lot more. This image of you and serenity, and you're going to have this smile, but actually you're stressed out of your head, and all you can think of is that baby, because it really kicks in the evolution. You are minding this child to the exclusion. Everything else falls away, but it means you can't think anymore, and you certainly can't write. I couldn't. Women have. They really, you know, and I don't know how. I remember I had to interview Barbara Kingsolver, and she, you know, one of the things I read, she used to breastfeed while I just, wow, like I could barely finish sentences, you know. I wouldn't have been able to have this conversation with you. So, you know, I wanted to write about that.
Sorry to cut across there for a sec, but also there's a sense in the essay that this stuff has been kept secret, and there's a feeling in the essay that there's a kind of a sort of almost clandestine communication amongst these new mothers, who are, especially one in particular in the Keough, who are kind of like sort of secretly enemies of the regime. And
it was Hollis Street, and it's shocking.
Sorry, not the Keough, it was Hollis Street.
It's shocking in there. I was like, what? You know, it's like they do it on purpose. They wake you up, and you know, there's babies screaming the whole time. So you're like, I came out of there like hallucinating. I still ask my husband, like, what was I like? And he went, you weren't at your best, because I hadn't slept for like I knew I was crazy. I knew I'd kind of broken on through to the other side in there, and I've never broken through to the other side. It was that kind of jittery, and then you have to take home this infant, and it's tough. Like it's so hard. Yes, women will tell you between themselves just all the ravages to their body, for instance, but there's a public face that we put out. I kind of think of birth as like if you're walking along a street and there's lots of people and you fall and you pick yourself up and you go, I'm fine. You may have a broken leg. You're going to get out of there and then sort it out. You're not going to go, okay, everyone make a fuss. I've, you know, broken my leg here. You just get up and you say you're fine. You keep moving, and that's a real Irish mammy thing to do. It does, yeah. I and there's a delicate line, because if you really spell it out, is that the end of the human race? Because who's going to go down? Like, if I'd known everything I knew now, I think I said this in the essay, I wouldn't have had the baby. But then I wouldn't have had the baby. And now I have this child who is the best thing that's ever happened to me. So I suppose now I've been writing about a novel about it, and if I have a thesis, which I don't, it's a novel, but if I did, it would be that the genders need to work together on this one. You know, babies have fathers, fathers need to be part of their lives, and the children need to understand. That's why the novel I'm writing is actually addressed to the child, what motherhood is, so that we all kind of go, okay, this is what it is, and we need to support the mother as well, you know, not just go, you've a lovely baby, good luck with that.
Yeah, and then to be prepared to be the object of such intense need and
yes,
yeah.
I mean, it's great, but it does wreck your brain. It is great, like I wouldn't change it at all, but I would have supported myself better, you know, I'd have put certain things in place to have a fuller understanding. And now, then I go, well, then I wouldn't have written this novel that I have. I'm hopefully will finish it in between the mothering.
Yeah, in between. Because the essay, I mean, it's back to that theme of change, and that it does sort of narrate this terrifying kind of plunge into an abyss and a fear that change is permanent.
Yeah.
And you really bring the reader along in that sense, and then at the end of it, turns out that it does end.
It does, yes.
Or it turns into something new.
Yeah.
But it's not in a kind of sentimental, it's an ending that is hopeful or positive, but that doesn't erase the suffering that led up to it.
It's all a lot of the motherhood stuff is couched in sentimental terminology, and it's very patronising to the mother, I find, because I'm still an intelligent being, you know, and I'm still a creative being, even though for that period I was stupid, and it was really, really interesting to not, like, I remember looking at a dart timetable and kind of, I have to be there at this, I can't do that sum, you know, it was really interesting to no longer be able to think, because you're used to just everything being truncated, and you know, you forget everything, and to make that huge life change was, as an artist, it's interesting, you know, looking back on it. I want to go, whoa, that was, how do I depict that without it being really boring and whiny?
Yeah.
And that has been the challenge, to depict it, to make a dramatic story out of it, which I hope I have.
So something I was struck by in the essay is, so it's obviously a very powerful feminist essay. It is succeeding in bringing a kind of hidden experience that women have, making it public, bring it out into the light, and it does it in a, you know, all holds barred, very powerful way. And the figure that you reach for company in the essay is W.B. Yeats.
Yeah, I know, it's mad.
So how about that? Because he's
a well-known mother.
That's a very maternal figure of W.B. Yeats. So you've because he's come in for a drubbing recently.
Has he?
Place. So
has he come in for a drubbing?
Yeah, here and there. Yeah.
Okay.
As I suppose. Yeah, I suppose you couldn't really say he was a feminist on it, or maternal. But so tell us about that, and I found that a very interesting part of it. That it says something about your relationship
we're in very
to
interesting
literature.
times with how the males are being reevaluated. We are, you know, and you know, I'm sorry that it's funny having reread Joyce. It's like he got it right every time, you know, and yes, he will find it. He is on the right side, and then yes, I can see Yeats. There are problems with women there. Why did I turn to Yeats? Because he's one of, remember, the stones I was putting in place, and he is a great artist, and I value that more than anything. And Yeats had writer's block, and I think that's amazing. And then he came out of it with a poem about writer's block, and that was my touchstone there. You know, I lie down where all the ladders start in the foul rag and bone shop of the heart. So if a great figure like him can lie down in the foul rag and bone shop, I didn't lie down, I fell down, but you know, I looked to him to help me, and they do help me.
Yeah.
You know, like Yeats helps me, It's funny, I've been thinking about Yeats and Joyce. Here I am, like years, why am I thinking about them? Because they're my touchstones, but I was thinking about, you know, Yeats was his response to the pandemic and to, you know, Joyce is writing Ulysses about, you know, Corny Kelleher and all these little tiny humane interactions and sad things, funny things, man grieving loss of his child and marriage, and son grieving the loss of his mother, but all the little stupid interactions they have, whereas Yeats was writing at the same time, you know, things fall apart, the falcon cannot hear the falconer, and it's totally different ways of looking at the same thing.
Yeah.
And I find that really interesting, because the thing that joins them is they're artists, and it's all about the imagination, and you take this awful thing and you come up with this stuff, look what you could, you know, and there's salvation. So yeah, I suppose Yeats isn't going to be the great feminist.
Although what it suggests, you know, that
Well, he helped me.
Yeah. That,
when I was on my knees in the Faber Faber
or his
Bone
poetry
shop.
did. Like he didn't come over and babysit,
No,
which
he
would have
did
been
not.
very
No.
helpful.
Nor did Joyce.
No, to Joyce. No.
I don't think well, that's what I was reading about Joyce, is to be in the bed with the kids crawling over him writing Ulysses.
Yeah.
I don't know how you do that.
So maybe just wrap up then by, there's two things I wanted to ask you about before we finish. One is you're not on social media. That's not part of your work as a writer.
No.
And
don't get it. I'm really glad I grew up after that. I'm really glad I grew up. I can't even understand how Twitter unfolds and how you follow sentences, but it's that also the kind of invasion of privacy. I couldn't bear it. So I don't want to hear other people's opinions of me. I think that comes from going to a convent school where there's girls bitching about each other. They're not going to hear anything good.
yeah, it's a primitive form of social media. Yeah.
But like, thank God we weren't armed with phones then.
Yeah.
Can you, like, I actually have thought that, I'd say maybe 10 times I've gone, oh, thank God they didn't have phones.
in on top of
yeah,
that. Yeah,
then it's following you, you know, because it is, and that is a universal thing. I don't think that's a generational thing, that girls will undermine each other in certain ways, boys will thump each other. You know, I think, so no, I don't do social media and find it kind of frightening and creepy.
So the last question is, do you want to tell us something, whatever you want, as much as little you want, about the next book?
Okay, it's a novel about motherhood, about the early years before a child can really speak. And it's about, it's about a lot of stuff, but it's about that severance of self, where you have to become, by definition, a totally new person, and you lose who you are. It's about the existential boredom of being stuck with a little kid. It's about the panics that happen. It's about the difficulties it inflicts on a marriage, but it's about the love, you know, the incredible love as well. It's really, you mentioned humour. I remember thinking when I started this book must not be funny, because there's nothing funny about any of this. And in the beginning it's not funny, but then it gets funny, and then it gets okay, and then we all find our way and we move on. And my little theory is just that people just sort of forget those early years, because babies erase themselves, you know, they get bigger and you forget the little one, then they're big and you forget that one, and they keep kind of overriding their past, but you do forget those early years, and they are really difficult. So I wanted to write about the stuff we usually forget, and that's what I have written about, I think.
And it's fiction. It's not a memoir, but it's fiction.
And it's funny, when I wrote that essay in Winter Papers, it's the most read thing I've ever written.
Really?
And there was lots of people wanted me to write more. And this, I suppose, goes back into the social media thing, but it's not about me, it's about the imagination. You know, here's this set of circumstances, what can your imagination do with that? You know, I realised more than ever, I believe in fiction. I love fiction. I think it's really interesting that you can just make stuff up, you know? You don't even know what you're going to make up till you make it up. And I have faith in that.
That is a perfect place to end this and the series. Thank you so much, Claire.
Thank you, Barry. Thank you.